Article 3, whether God exists. I answer that the existence of God can be proved in 5 ways. The first and more manifest way is the argument from motion. It is certain and evident to the senses that in the world some things are in motion. Now, whatever is in motion is put in motion by another, for nothing can be in motion except it is in potentiality to that towards which it is in motion. Whereas a thing moves inasmuch as it is in act. For motion is nothing else than the reduction of something from potentiality to actuality. But nothing can be reduced from potentiality to actuality except by something in a state of actuality. Thus, that which is actually hot, as fire, makes wood which is potentially hot to be actually hot, and thereby moves and changes it. Now, it is not possible that the same thing should be at once in actuality and potentiality in the same respect, but only in different respects. What is actually hot cannot simultaneously be potentially hot, but it is simultaneously potentially cold. It is therefore impossible that in the same respect and in the same way a thing should be both mover and moved, that is, that it should move itself. Therefore, whatever is in motion must be put in motion by another. If that by which it is put in motion be itself put in motion, then this also must needs be put in motion by another, and that by another again. But this cannot go on to infinity, because then there would be no first mover, and consequently no other mover. Seeing that subsequent movers move only inasmuch as they are put in motion by the first mover, as the staff moves only because it is put in motion by the hand. Therefore it is necessary to arrive at a first mover put in motion by no other, and this everyone understands to be God. The term motion here is more broad than how we normally think of it. It means any sort of change. So it's not just displacement moving from point A to point B, it's any kind of change, whatever. So change equals motion, motion equals change for Aquinas, just like it did for Aristotle. So the first way is really the argument from change. Thomas says there are no self-movers. Is this correct? I think it's obvious that non-living things do not move themselves. A rock does not move itself, for example. What about living things? Can't I move my own arm? I suppose I can, but more precisely, it is my brain which moves my arm. My arm cannot move itself, and my brain in turn is moved by my will. And my will per se is not a thing. As I've said before, these proofs are mere summaries, these 5 ways, so we should not expect Thomas to spell out all these sorts of details. He's not going to go into every detail like he would do if he was giving a full-blown exposition of the proof. Thomas is right then when he says that nothing can move itself. Next, the dumb ox distinguishes between potentiality and actuality. These terms are used in their traditional senses and are thus self-explanatory. Some people may not like the example he uses to illustrate, but the principle is sound. The way things really are is actual. The way things could later become are at the way things could later become are at present potential. So Aquinas gives the example of wood can be moved from being potentially hot to being actually hot by being lit on fire. Alright, so motion occurs, says Thomas, when a thing in a state of potentiality is reduced to actuality. And now I'm going to give my own example of this process. Imagine a young and small tree. This tree is short or small, as I just said. It is actually short, but potentially tall. As time goes on, it grows to be tall. Its potential tallness was reduced to actuality. In other words, it moved or changed from being a short tree to being a tall tree. And we may wish to reflect on the cause of this motion. The tree itself did not cause its own change. Instead, the sun was responsible for the change. The sun partially explains. There's other factors, I suppose, in addition to the sun, but the sun is part of the explanation. So the sun, through photosynthesis, is responsible for the growth of the tree, the motion of the tree growing taller. But what causes the sun to radiate heat? Some other mover, let us say. And this new mover is moved by still another mover, and so on. So we've got this regress of movers. But we cannot go on to infinity with this regress. We must reach an unmoved first mover. The basic idea of this argument is that things are moved by other things, which are moved by still other things, and so on. However, we have to stop eventually. And where do we stop? We do not stop with things in motion, for they themselves presuppose something more fundamental, namely the source of their motion. We must stop, therefore, in something which is unmoved. Though Thomas does not explicitly say so here, this unmoved mover must be pure act or pure actuality. That is, the unmoved mover has no potentiality within himself, and is thus incapable of change. At any rate, the unmoved mover is obviously not part of the natural realm, for nature is in constant flux or constant motion. If the unmoved mover is not natural, then the unmoved mover must be supernatural. This being can only be what philosophers and theologians have traditionally called God. So, God exists. And we know that God exists on the basis of what, quote, is certain and evident to the senses, as Thomas explains in the first way. So it's certain and evident to our senses that there is motion, and from this God exists. It's certain and evident to our senses that God exists. Shalom. Oh, and the next way will be the argument that God exists from the fact of causation. There is causation in the world, and we argue from that to the existence of God. Thank you.